Welcome back. After 12 weeks, President Trump has little to show when it comes to legislative accomplishments, but he is flexing his military muscle. North Korea is vowing, quote, a merciless response to U.S. provocations. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was in Moscow this week meeting with Russian leaders. President Trump says relations with Russia may be at an all-time low following missile strikes on Syrian Air Force Base. And the U.S. has been at war in Afghanistan since 2001. Yesterday, the U.S. dropped the largest non-nuclear bomb ever used in combat on an ISIS tunnel network in Nangarhar province. I hope I said that right. The aggressive moves quite a contrast to what President Trump called for on the campaign trail. And here with analysis of the week in U.S. foreign policy is Christian Ziegler, Republican State Committee man for Sarasota County, Keith Fitzgerald, a professor of political science at New College of Florida and a former Democratic member of the Florida House, and Dr. Robert Beliski, the president of the Sarasota Institute for Lifelong Learning. He is a leading expert in Russian civil and military possible, and we are thrilled to have you, because there's so much to discuss about Russia, both in terms of what is happening this week and then also some of our domestic politics. Doctor, what is your take in terms of the back and forth because of the Syrian air strikes between Russia right now? Is it, as the president is saying, that Russian-U.S. relations are at the lowest levels ever?
No, they're not.
Okay.
I mean, they were worse when the Ukrainian crisis was at its high point, when Putin was taking over Crimea and they were doing the rebellions in eastern Ukraine, and we were sending battleships towards Russian cities in the Black Sea that were loaded with missiles. That's when they were really tense, and then after that, lots of military maneuvers.
I also remember something called the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, that was a long time ago.
Right.
But
so what do you think all this rhetoric is about?
I think
it's a loaded question.
Yeah, well, on both sides, there are political reasons. We have the domestic ones, that is, Trump wants to overcome the whole story that he's some kind of a Putin stooge, and that's pretty much gone right now, right? Out of the headlines.
We'll ask Keith and Christian about that.
Yeah, and Putin, you know, he enjoys being the guy who stands up to the big bad West. That's part of his whole persona.
Keith, so does the events of this week basically take care of all that talk about Trump being a Putin, patsy?
Well, no, I think that Professor Borilski's point is it takes it out of the headlines immediately, and in some respects the public sphere, what we have of it today, has the attention span of my golden retriever. You know, it's like what's happening right now, and it's off the headlines right now, but it may be back next week if indictments come. I don't think anybody really knows where that's going. It doesn't solve the problem for him. And I'm not sure if that's really the motivation of this. One of the speculations of the week is that President Trump is simply learning how the world works, and he honestly didn't know much about it before. And so this naive view that we could be buddies with the Russians is falling apart, because he's starting to appreciate, no, we have real differences with the Russians, and maybe we can't ever be friends, so to speak, and this is showing up all over the place. But he's just sort of learning about things and how the world works.
Christian, what do you think?
Well, I think it's less about learning, and I think it's more about Donald Trump being a businessman. And when you get in business, the way it works is you give the individual the benefit of the doubt, and then you start seeing how negotiations play out or how your interactions play out, and then you adjust on the fly. So from Donald Trump, when he campaigned on America First, more of an isolationist foreign policy, but he also campaigned on a strong military and a strong America. So I think what you saw in Syria, by going in there after the chemical weapons use, really set the tone. He drops that bomb the other day, and that sets another message to North Korea, and I think that's what we need.
You set up two things there that I wanted to talk about. One, as you said, the president campaigned on a platform of America First and more of an isolationist. We both can't say it. But let me throw some of the president's own statements at you. I think NATO may be obsolete. And then this month, I said it was obsolete. It's no longer obsolete. When it comes to China currency manipulation, they're devaluing their currency to a level that you wouldn't believe. It makes it impossible for our companies to compete. This week, There was no currency manipulation. Syria. Syria is not our problem. Do not attack Syria. Fix USA. Tonight I ordered the military strike on airfield in Syria. Part of the conversation that you hear this week is, geez, there have been so many things here that have been, you know, totally opposite than what he campaigned on.
Well, okay, but when you look at this, like NATO, for example, he says NATO's obsolete. They need to start paying their fair share. They come out, they say they're going to pay their fair share. Now he adjusts his policy on NATO, right? China, he's frustrated with China. He campaigned hard against China. And now, obviously, we had the visit from China, and it looks like China is helping with the North Korea deal. So again, Donald Trump, I think what you're seeing is typical negotiation, is you come out with a position, you come out with a statement, and then you adjust based on the negotiation, and you try to get something from someone, and then you give
either
something.
they were manipulating
Well,
their currency or they weren't.
Well, yeah, and that's just so crazy naive, in all due respect. I mean, that's crazy naive.
That's how business works.
Well, but it's not how world politics works. I'm sorry, business and world politics, two different things. Russia and the United States have had relations going back for decades and decades, back to the Soviet Union. You don't change things overnight because you had a conversation. Same thing with China. Same thing with NATO. The Baltic states, for example, took those statements about NATO being obsolete as incredibly significant because their national security is totally dependent on that. That wasn't just some ploy to get
the way
some...
foreign policy works is you
gentlemen,
develop relationships and you leverage those relationships, and that's exactly what Donald Trump did.
That is
we
not
have less
true.
than
Exactly
we have less than a
That's
minute
not
left
true.
in this segment. But Professor, I wanted to ask you one more question because there was so much talk about how the president never said anything unkind about Putin and Russia. Now we have this. You are an astute observer of the Russian media and so forth. Did the Russians think that they were going to have smooth sailing?
Well, I watched lots of Russian talk shows, particularly the main channels.
RTV, right?
Yeah, on Russian TV, that the Russians see, the same shows the Russians see. And they were kind of bemused and baffled by this when it started.
Well, so are we.
Yeah, and the more conservative type said, well, we're hearing this rhetoric, but American policy doesn't change that much from president to president, and that we shouldn't expect any radical changes over here. Where others were generally happy to hear what he was saying, but the bottom line from the establishment was don't expect any big change.
Okay, we are just getting started. We'll pick up the discussion after a check on our weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing military action by the Trump administration, rhetoric between the U.S. and North Korea, and becoming increasingly combative. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says relations with Russia are at a new low, and the U.S. dropped the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan. Our guests tonight are Republican State Committee man Christian Ziegler, Professor of Political Science Keith Fitzgerald, and Russian policy expert Dr. Robert Polisky. And Doctor, let me start again with you, because we've been talking about the U.S. relationship with Russia. You say the Syrian airstrikes did not work for Vladimir Putin at home.
No, they really were a disaster for Putin because for the last couple of years he's been going around boasting that I have stood up to America. I'm running Syrian policy now. You can't decide anything here without me. The bomb landed and it was, hey, wake up call, America's here. So not only that, but at home they said, well, what's your plan in Syria after all? He's stuck there too.
Right. So his 95% approval rating is down a little bit.
Might be down a little. It doesn't matter what that rating is, but he doesn't really have a plan to get out of there.
I'm interested in what your take is on the investigation into Russian interference in the U.S. election and the congressional investigations, because even this week, there was a story just the other day that it was foreign intelligence services that alerted the CIA and the FBI that they were, during the campaign, they were hearing chatter, they were picking up, allegedly Russian intelligence officers dealing with members of the Trump campaign. How unusual is this?
Well, I wonder what we knew and what we didn't know, first of all, because we have the best monitoring and intelligence service in the world. So we don't like to talk about what we know in public. So I'm a little bit of a skeptic about some of these stories.
Let me go at it this way. There have been so many stories about Carter Page, the Trump advisor, and whether or not the business dealings he may or may not have been offered, and also Paul Manafort, who has made millions dealing with Putin allies, in and of itself, in terms of people with political connections in the U.S. on both sides of the aisle, is that unusual?
Well, I see it in the context of thousands of American expats in Moscow doing business. Every major bank has Moscow branches. Companies are over there. There's so many people doing business, offering consulting services, lobbying for Russian businesses in this country, etc. So if you put it in this big context, it doesn't look as wild or as strange. There's just an awful lot going on.
Christian, there was so much going on this past week with Syria and Afghanistan, North Korea, but this story is not going away. It's the old drip, drip, drip that as long as there are investigations, you're going to have stories.
Yeah, I find it somewhat humorous that one week members of the left want to talk about the fact that Donald Trump and Putin are best friends and they're working together to undermine our election process. And then the next week, the left starts complaining that Donald Trump and Putin's relationship's putting us at risk because they're not getting along enough. I think what we're seeing here is when we saw the November results, Democratic Party, they wanted to blame something on their loss. They focused on this Russia thing. The media loves it. The media keeps it in the headlines. Carter Page, he was not
it's
a
not
very...
the media keeping it in the headlines. It's our revelations that are keeping it in the headlines.
Well, there aren't many revelations that have come out. There's no proof. There's no proof that's actually come out. And you talk about Carter Page, you know, an advisor, everyone says senior advisor. He didn't even have that big of a role in the Trump administration or during the Trump campaign.
Well,
so it's really the media and the left that's keeping it active.
It was the FBI director.
This is an effort.
Hold
Alan,
on. It was the FBI director says they were not just investigating contacts between Russian intelligence and the Trump campaign, but possible coordination.
But nothing has come out. There's no proof that's come out, but the media and the left's focused on it with one goal in mind, and that's to undermine Donald Trump's presidency.
So, Keith, where is the proof?
Well, first of all, Christian's favorite technique is the straw man. He attributes arguments to the left. I don't know where he's getting the idea that people on the left are upset that we're having tense relations with Russia. My position, at least, has been consistent throughout. On the other hand, you know, the investigation at this point, if you listen to what's coming out on the Hill, there are certainly members in both parties who are very much concerned about what they're finding out. Now, it's one thing whether or not this will lead to an impeachment or resignation. That's an issue over here. I don't know of any direct lines at this point that point right back to Donald Trump himself. On the other hand, this is a global pattern that the Russians have engaged in. They're inserted themselves in the current French election, for example. So I think everybody who's sober about these things has some concern about this, and it's really just a new frontier. To be honest, the United States has done similar things of playing in elections through leaks and that sort of thing. And this is a new sphere of international conflict that we are all going to have to adjust to.
All right, there are at least two other areas I want to get into. One of it, which is a comment by the new chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, Ronna Romney McDaniel, who this week said, "It is hard to win if you don't govern. If you make these promises, it's going to be hard for us to win in the midterms." Christian, one could argue that the strikes in Syria and Afghanistan make the president look real good this past week, but we're closing in 100 days, and there really has not been much in terms of legislative victories, aside from putting Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. So to all those people who are watching this now, good Trump supporters, who are wondering where is tax reform, where is a new health care bill, what's the answer?
Okay, tax reform and the health care bill, they're coming down the pipe, right? They've talked about that they're going to be bringing up the health care bill again. Tax reform, they've already started looking at. I know the Ways and Means Committee has been looking at it. But I will tell you that, you know, it's somewhat, there's a fascination that nothing has occurred in the first 100 days. Let's look at Trump's record. Keystone Pipeline, Dakota Pipeline, that was talked about for years. There was no action. Instituted those are being built. Talk about immigration, he's looking at the wall, he's starting to build the wall, and he also ended catch and release this week. No one's talking about that, but he's instituting things that on the campaign trail he promised. Supreme Court justice, that'll affect us more than any presidency for decades to come. He got him on the court.
I'm getting 1 minute. There's one other thing I wanted to get to, and that's golf. I mean, how many times did you hear Trump bang Obama on his golf outings? And the president is down here, and we love the president in Florida, but every single week The bill is racking up. And for all those people who criticize President Obama for his occasional golf trips and vacations, what do folks like you say?
I'm one that, you look at Trump, he's an outsider, he's not an insider, he's not a Washington guy, he's trying to get out of Washington, he goes down to Mar-a-Lago, should he go that many times? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of,
So it was okay for him, but not for President Obama?
I'm not saying that. I mean, I didn't oppose President Obama playing golf, right? But, it's still, again, it's still early. He's still trying to get his team on the field. Democrats are holding up in the Senate, a lot of his appointees. I was up in D.C. meeting with a lot of the federal agencies. None of them are filled. It's difficult. You have the top guy that just got filled, all the middle. So it's hard to run a government when you don't have your team on the field.
All right,
There's no team.
Yeah.
What's that?
Same in foreign policy. The Russians say this. We don't know what we're going to be able to do with Tillerson. They love Tillerson. They think he's great, but he doesn't have a team.
But that's getting held up in the Senate.
Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, regulating charter schools. Stay with us. Welcome back. During the campaign, President Trump ran on an isolationist message. Now tensions are nearing a boiling point on the Korean peninsula. Russian relations are at a new low following a missile strike on Syria, and the U.S. dropped the biggest non-nuclear bomb ever used in combat. What can this week tell us about foreign policy and what's to come? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. We didn't talk about North Korea.
Yeah.
How concerned
I'll make
are
a few points here, right? Russia's
Sure.
not as bad as anyone's saying, and the Russians aren't as concerned about us as people think they are. The Asian situation is the tricky one. It looks to me as if China and the United States are giving a signal to people in North Korea to overthrow the leader. That's what I think's going on. If we do any strikes on North Korea, it could be a complete disaster because he is unstable.
Keith,
He can destroy Seoul in a matter of half an hour.
So let's stay with this for the time we have left, because for going back to the Obama administration, the Bush administration, the Clinton administration before that, it's been this ebb and flow. Are we reaching a changing point where we finally get rid of this maniac?
Well, sometimes in foreign policy there are not many good options, and this has been the situation with North Korea for a very long time, and it certainly goes back to not just the second Bush administration, but the first one and even before that. It's not easy options. On the other hand, this idea that we might be signaling them, that signaling the domestic forces to overthrow the guy is a very concerning thing. I mean, I think we all ought to be a little bit nervous about that, because this guy is an erratic, impulsive person.
Best case scenario, Christian?
Well, I think what you've seen with Trump is, he went into Syria when people didn't think he would. He took action, so it showed he was going to take action. He just dropped that big bomb. It shows that we got the firepower behind it. But then what's interesting is he's working with China on the back end, and China's they're their only trade partner, and they're the most vital piece of this. And it looks like they're coming in, they're sending that signal. I do agree with both Keith and the professor over there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's a very dangerous situation because obviously he does have nuclear weapons. You have the capital of South Korea so close to that border that they could rain artillery on. This is something we need to watch, and Donald Trump's going to be strong, I think, and that's exactly what we need.
All right. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, charter school regulation. The state's attorney's office is investigating after the Island Village Montessori school allegedly violated Florida's Sunshine Law. Charter schools receive taxpayer dollars but have more autonomy than public schools. Sarasota School Board isn't taking action on the matter, and we ask what you think about the situation and charter schools. Meredith Cleveland writes, "We love Island Village Montessori School. Families love this school because the Bucks were not happy with the rule change and questioned it in the bullying fashion." Gene Buck responds to that by saying the school did not like us questioning the new policy and several other issues and discrepancies. We were not the only ones who were upset by what was going on. And Rob Albritton writes, sounds like this power trip is going to cost the school and Sarasota County a lot of hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Well, let us know what you think about U.S. foreign policy under President Trump. Join the conversation at our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past Roundtable discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Christian Ziegler is state committee man for the Republican Party of Sarasota County. Keith Fitzgerald is a professor of political science at New College of Florida. He was also a Democratic representative in the Florida House. And Dr. Robert Beliski is president of the Sarasota Institute for Lifetime Learning, and he is a leading expert on Russian military relations.